Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm sorry it's been a few weeks for me. I took some time off for Christmas and the holidays, and then I got sick, and I've been trying to make a video where I don't cough every 30 seconds, but I think I'm finally back to normal. So I've got a new tutorial for you guys today that is this combination lock tutorial that I think works really well. It's set up a little bit different than the last tutorial that we did where we used click events. You could still use click events on this, but I wanted to do something a little different using a widget so that you can actually move the mouse around and click on a widget here to interact with the dials. This works really well, I think, and the code is also, I think, a little bit more efficient. It is a little bit harder to follow just because we're kind of bouncing around some things quite a bit, but I think it is done a little bit better. So it's a little bit longer one, so just sit back and relax and watch through it. Take your time, and if you guys have any questions, as always, let me know. If you guys want to support me, be sure to check out the Patreon and the links below to the assets that I sell. On Patreon, you can get early access to these videos. You can also get assets that I create that I give out on Patreon, and it's just a great way to support me. And the other thing that I'll mention really quickly is there is, I believe, just one prerequisite that you need to know for this tutorial, which is just the interaction tutorial that I did. So I'll leave a link to that below. Or if you have your own interaction, you can, of course, use that. But I think that should be it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, here we go. So there's a couple of notes that I want to mention before we really get into everything. First of all, I've already imported the meshes here, and I've created the material instances for all of these. Just quickly, one thing to remember when you import these textures, make sure on the ORMs you go in and check or uncheck the sRGB. And on, I believe it was on Latch, the ORM imported as a normal map. So it imported like this. Make sure that that is set to default. And again, sRGB is unchecked. Those are specifically with the ORMs. If you need any more assistance on that, you can go back and check the video where I show how to create materials and set all of this up a little bit more in detail. But I figured I would skip that since most of you guys know how to do that, and you can always check the other video for reference. The other thing that we need to do here is we can close the dial and the latch. On the actual combination lock, we need to add some sockets into here. And you could do this by making this a skeletal mesh, but there is an easy way that we can just add sockets right here. I don't know if this is in older versions of Unreal Engine 5. I'm using 5.4, so it should be in there in 5.4 or above. But if we go up here to our socket manager, we can create a socket. And these are basically going to be where the dials are going to be placed. And this is just going to make it easier for us to get those set right. So I'm going to create 3 of these, and we're going to call them dial 01, dial 02, and dial 03. The first one I'm going to call dial 02. The reason that I'm going to do that is, let's see, if we go in here, I'm going to get this side view so that we can really see where we want these to be. I believe right about there is good. So actually that is perfect. We have nice even number there. So 2 on the X for that one. And then I'm going to make another one. We're going to call dial 01. That will move up here. And so we'll go ahead and set X to 2. And then I want to just move this up to, I want to try and get that right in the center. That looks pretty good there. It looks like it's 1.4. And then 1.4 on Z. And then if we add another one in, dial 03. So this one will be 2 on the X and minus 1.4 on the Z. So again, I feel like I kind of went through this a little fast, but basically what we're doing is just creating sockets for where the dials are going to go. So this will make more sense when we actually create the blueprint for the dial, but I wanted to just go ahead and get this created to show how that's working. Okay, so once you have that, click on Save. And now let's go into our blueprints. Let's create a new blueprint. Will be actor. We'll call this BP combination lock. And I'm also going to go ahead and create another one that we're going to call BP dial. And let's go ahead and open up the dial first. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a blueprint for the actual dial and create some of the functionality in there. And then we're also going to have the actual combination lock here, and we're going to basically import this blueprint 3 times. And it's going to make it a little bit easier. It sounds a little confusing right now, but it's going to make it a little bit cleaner. So just bear with me here as we go. So the first thing that we want to do is get our dial. I'm going to drag that in. And let's just take a look at that. Okay, that looks good. Now, one problem that I do see that we're going to have is the way this is rotated, it is starting with 1. And we could leave it like that, but it's going to cause issues with this because of the way that we're going to do some of the math. We really want this to start on 0. So I could have fixed this, but this is just a good little way to show you how to fix something like this. So let's just drag this in to our level, and we'll edit this really quick. I'm going to just make this bigger just so that we can see what's going on here. And I'm going to go into the modeling mode, and I'm going to go to edit pivots. And I want to essentially just rotate this pivot. We have 10 numbers on here. There's 360 degrees in a circle. So 10 divided by 360, I'm going to rotate that 36 degrees. I believe it's 36, or is it negative 36? Let me just see here. Yeah, okay. So that is perfect. So again, all we did there was just go to the edit pivot. I have this saved as a favorite in modeling tools. If you don't have it there, this is why I have it saved as a favorite, because I cannot ever remember where it is. It's right here under Xform. But again, I just save it as a favorite because that's one of the most common things that I use in modeling tools. Okay, so we can close that out or just delete that. And we got that set to where we want it to be. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go into our event graph, and let's go ahead and delete this stuff. I'm going to create a couple of custom events. First one is going to be called find number. And let's create another one, custom events. And this one will just be called rotate dial. And let's do the rotate dial first. So for this one, we need to make a variable. I'm just going to call this can rotate. And we are going to just drag this out, get that, and do a branch. We just want this because we want to we want to be able to, or when we rotate this, we don't want to be able to spam the button that we're pressing and just rotate it constantly. So we want to rotate it, and while we're rotating it, we want this to be set to false. So I'm going to grab this again, hold Alt to set, and out of true, we're going to set that to false. And actually, we want to set this to true by default. So if we compile here, we're going to set this to true by default. Compile and save. And then I'm also going to do a play sound here. I'll add these in here later, but you can use the ones that I use, or you can use whatever sound you're going to use. This is just going to be the sound that the dial is going to make as it rotates. And we want to do a timeline here. So add timeline. We'll call this dial rotation TL timeline. And we want to play from start. And this is going to be the length of however long your dial takes to rotate. So for me, I think I'm going to do 0.25 seconds, but you can do whatever you want. We'll add a float track, call this alpha, and we will add a key at time 0, value 0, and then we'll add one more at time 0.25 and a value of 1. If you've watched any of my other tutorials, you probably know how to do this. So I might be going a little fast, but I'm still trying to explain what we do as we go through here. So the next thing I'm going to do is just click on both of these, shift click on both of these, and then set this to auto, just so that we get a little S curve there. And that should be good. And now what we want to do is we want to get our dial, and we want to set the relative rotation. Okay, and we are, we'll right click on the new rotation, split the struct pin. That'll go into update. And out of alpha here, we are going to do a lerp. And this, we don't want this plugged into A. We're going to plug that into alpha. Our return value is going to go into Z because we want this to rotate on the Z axis. And if you remember when we changed our pivot, we already figured out that we want this to rotate 36 degrees each time. So like if I put in 36 here, then we go to 1, and then 72, and so on. So I'll just reset that for now. So what we want to do, we want to start at 0, and we want to go to 36. Okay. But we can't just, I did plug this in here, but this is not going to work for us because we need to create a variable for the actual dial rotation, because the way this is going to do, it's just going to automatically go back to 0 and then move it to 36 each time. So let's create another variable, call it dial rotation, and that will be a float. And what we're going to do is drag this out, and we want to add our return value to our dial rotation, and then this value will actually be what Z is going to be. Now, that gets us part of the way. Let me clean this up a little bit. What we need to do now, once it is finished, we need to set the dial rotation. So I'm going to drag out, hold Alt, and from finished, I'm going to plug into dial rotation. And what this value is going to be is it's going to be the same value here. So we can just drag from here to the set dial rotation. And then we need a way to reset this back to 0 once it goes all the way around. So we can get our dial rotation again. And if I drag out of here and do greater than or equal to 360, then we can do a branch. And when that is true, we are going to set our dial rotation again back to 0. So when that is true, we set that back to 0. And then we want to, I'm going to duplicate our SM dial there, and we want to set relative rotation again back to 0. And we can actually just leave that as it is because that is already set at 0. Okay, so that should be good. Let's go ahead and compile and save. And now let's create our find number event here. So what we want to do here, we essentially want to convert our dial rotation to a number. And we will need a couple of variables here for that. So I'm going to create one called index, and it is going to be an integer. And we will we'll make that public. So click on our little I here. And then we're going to do one more called number. And that will be an integer as well. And on our index, one more thing that I want to do is I want to, over here on expose on spawn, I want to check that to true. And now what we can do is we can get our dial rotation. And if we divide by 36, then we can truncate that, which basically converts this into an integer. And we can set our number here. So get number, hold Alt, and I'll plug that in like so. And I'll just straighten that up. Highlighting those and pressing Q will straighten all of that for you. And that should be good. Now, what we want to do on our rotate dial, at the very end, on finished, we want to run find number. So here we're going to do find number. And then I also want to do this on false as well. So I'm going to just plug this in here and just add a couple of reroute nodes just to make it a little bit more clear what is going on. Okay. So I think that is good for right now. We're going to revisit this in a second. Or in a few minutes, but for right now, let's do a little bit of work in our combination lock. So the first thing that we will want to do is go ahead and add our mesh in there, or our meshes. So let's get our combination lock, and I also want our latch. Go ahead and compile and save. And we need to adjust the location here of the latch. Try and get it lined up as good as we can. That looks pretty good. Okay. And now let's go to the event graph. And let's delete, I'm going to leave event begin play because we'll need that. Delete those others. And out of event begin play, we are going to spawn the dial here. But we want to do them, we want to get 3 of them, right? So we are going to run a for loop, just a regular for loop. And we're going to have 3. So our first index is going to be 0. So we'll have 0, 1, and 2. So that 2 will be our last index. And out of here, we will spawn actor from class. The class will be BP dial. Okay, now we get an error here. The reason is because it needs an actual spawn transform, but we don't actually need to change the transform. But if we just split this struct, it will automatically fill in these 0, 0, 0 and transform for us. And then if we compile again, we should be fine. And then our index is going to plug into index here. And we are going to need a variable or a reference to our dial here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable. We'll call this dials. And because we're going to have 3 of them, first of all, it's going to be BP dial. Object reference. But we are going to change this to an array because we're going to have multiple ones. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get dial or get dials, and we're going to add, and our return value is going to go into here. We'll hook this up here. And then we want to, also out of our return value, we want to attach actor to components. And our parent is going to be combination lock. And now you'll see that we have a socket name here. So what we can do is we can drag out of here and type select. And we can add another pin. We need 3 of them. And now we just need to make sure that we name these exactly what we named our sockets here. Okay, so we have dial 01, dial 02, dial 03. And then the index is going to be out of index here, like so. Okay, let's go ahead and save. And now we should be able to go ahead and check this. Let's drag our blueprint out, see if this is working. And I'm going to make it just bigger just so that we can see that easier. And there we go. That looks perfect. So you can see our dials. It's not really ideal height. Let me also just add another light in here to make things easier. So now you can see our dials have spawned in the correct position, correct location. It's lined up with 0, 0, 0, which is what we want. And that looks good. Okay, so the next thing is let's go ahead and add a camera in here so that we can have a camera to transition to. So we'll add camera. And go back to our viewport, and we want to just rotate this to where it is facing that. And then if we go back here, we can see kind of a preview of what we have. This is much easier to do with 2 screens, but I'm going to try and keep everything on one screen so you guys can see. So what I want to do is just kind of mess around until I get kind of the view that I want. And I might change the field of view here. Maybe let's try like 45. I think that looks pretty good. Something kind of like that. Compile and save. Now, since we want to be able to interact with this, let's go ahead and add our interaction interface. So go up to class settings, BPI, interaction. And again, if you don't know where I'm getting this from, be sure to go and watch the interaction tutorial where I show how to make this. It's really simple, but this is very useful as it will give us our interaction event here. And now what we want to do is we can get our player character, or I'm sorry, get player controller. And we want to set view target with blends. The new view target is going to be just self, because we are referencing the camera that we have here. And the blend time, this will be the time that it takes to transition the view to the camera. I'm going to set this to 0.5. You can play around with that, though, and set it to whatever you want. And we are going to want to do a few different things here. So let's get player character. We want to disable our movements. Disable movements. And thank you to, I don't remember who it was in one of the comments, but I was having an issue with this on the last tutorial, and it's because I was not setting ignore look input. So thank you for pointing that out. If we get our player controller again, there is an option to set ignore look inputs, and we want to check that to true. And then we also want to enable inputs. I'm going to put a tiny delay, excuse me, a tiny delay here, just because we have that half a second transition time. So I'm going to do 0.5 here. And we are going to enable inputs out of our player controller, enable inputs. Okay. And then we also want to show our mouse cursor. So out of player controller as well, set show mouse cursor. That will be true. And just try to clean this up a little bit. Okay. All right, that should be good. We can test that here. Actually, you know, one other thing I want to do, since the lock is not normally going to be this big, I'm going to also add just a box collision. And this will just give us a larger area for interacting, so we don't have to click exactly on that. That's totally optional. I mean, with it being this big, it doesn't really matter. But now when we click on that, we're going to zoom in, and you can see that we're seeing our character. We can fix that as well. But now when we zoom into that view. I might adjust it just a little bit to move it down, to move the camera down. Let's pull this out again so that we can see both of these. Okay, maybe kind of like that. Let's see how that looks. I think this is probably too big too. I mean, I want it to be a little bit bigger just so we can see it, but we can make that a little smaller. Okay, there we go. That looks good. So we obviously don't have any way to interact with this yet. We are going to do that shortly. Now, you could use click events, similar to what we did on the previous puzzle with the switches, but I wanted to show you guys how to do it a little bit different way. A little bit different way visually and a little bit different way coding as well. We'll use a widget to actually add a widget on here. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's just save everything. Make sure that we got everything saved. And let's go ahead and create a widget here. User interface, widget blueprint, user widget. We'll call this W_arrow. And really all this is going to be is just a white arrow that we can put onto our dials. And it'll just be over here, just kind of pointing to each dial so that we can click on those and actually have them do something. All right, so I need to import my arrow that I created here. Let's just put it in textures. So I'm just going to drag that in. And let's open that up. We want to set the texture group to UI and the compression settings to, where is it? User interface. That should be good. And then we just need a size box. And under fill screen here, we just want this to be desired on screen. And our width and height will be 256 by 256. That's just the size of our actual texture. If you have a different texture, you just want to set that to whatever the size of your texture is. And then we need a button. Okay, add that under there. We don't really need to rename this, but I just like to get into the habit of naming these. So I'm just going to call that arrow. And then under appearance, under style, we have the different states that they can be in for normal, hovered, and pressed. So for normal, we're going to get our texture and use that. And you can change the color here. So I think normal, we'll just make that white. And let's see, image size, that automatically sets it to 256 by 256. That's good. I'm going to just copy these, copy and paste onto hovered and then onto pressed as well. And the only thing I want to do is just change hovered. Let's maybe make that maybe kind of like a yellow, or I don't know, maybe like a green. And then when we press, let's make that like a darker, almost black, something like that, okay? Compile and save. And now let's go to our graph. Okay, so let's just delete these here because we don't need those. We need to create a reference to our dial. So let's create a variable and we'll call it dial ref. That will be BP dial object reference. And we need to initialize that. So what we can do is create a function here, and we'll call this initialize. And very simply, we're going to drag our dial ref out, holding Alt to set that, hook that up, and then from dial ref, I'm going to just drag that on initialize there, and it will automatically create an input for us. Go ahead and compile and save. And then where we are actually going to call that initialize is going to be in our BP dial. We're going to do that on events begin play. We need to actually get our arrow in here. So I'm going to add a widget. And that will be our arrow. And then under widget class, it will be w_arrow. Compile and save. And if we look on our viewport, it's obviously way too big. So we need to change the scale. I think 0.002 on all of these should work. And then I need to rotate it 90 degrees this way, and then 90 degrees this way. So basically on X and Z, we need to rotate that 90. And then I'm just going to move this to where it is roughly kind of beside these. And what we want to do when we go in here, it'll be easier to see. So if we play, now we can see that we have these widgets here right next to it. And you might want to change the size. I think that looks pretty good. But if you wanted them to be a little bigger or a little smaller, you can change that. Okay, and just a quick little side note here, something that I noticed that was kind of annoying me. If you look at the widget here, you can see a little bit of an outline on the edge, and I couldn't really figure out what this was for a while, but I did figure it out. And it is the anti-aliasing. So if you are seeing that, I would recommend going into your project settings and just search for anti-aliasing. And under default settings, anti-aliasing method, if we change that to something like FXAA, then it seems to go away. So now we're not seeing it. So I believe that is caused from anti-aliasing. There may be a setting in here somewhere that will fix that, but looking through it, I couldn't really find anything. So that is a fix for that. All right, so let's get back to our actual dial. Okay, so I'm still seeing it in there. Not really sure why, but as long as we're not seeing it in the game, should be good. Okay, so let's go back into our event graph now. And let's get our arrow. And out of that, we want to get user widget objects. And from here, we're going to cast to the actual widget. So w_arrow. And then out of our cast, we're going to run that initialize event that we created. And then as dial ref, that will just be self. Now, one other thing that I want to do is I want to, I mean, you don't have to do this, but when we go in and play, I don't want these all to just be set on 0, 0, 0. So I want to have this randomized. So what we can do is go back to our dial. So what we can do is create a function for that, and we'll just call that set random number. And we can get something called random integer. Random integer in range is what we're looking for. And we want to do between 0 and 9. And then out of our return value, we want to multiply. And we're going to convert this to a float. So right-click here to floats. That will be 36. And then we can, let's see, we can just create a local variable and just call this local rotation. And that'll just be a float. And we can drag out and set this here, like so. And then we'll get our dial, and we will set relative rotation. We'll split the struct pin here because we just want to set Z. So we'll plug that in there. And then we want to get our local rotation. And we want to set the dial rotation, that variable that we created there. And that will actually set the dial to that number. So now if we compile and save, now if we go back here, oh, actually, hold on, we didn't actually call this yet. So off of event begin play, after initialize, we will do, whoops, set random number. Okay, let's try that out now. I think I spawned outside. All right, there we go. And okay, so that set them all to 4. That's either a really weird coincidence or something is messed up. Let's see. Okay, I think that was just a really random coincidence that it set them all to 4, because now it's set to 697. Let's try it again. 407. Okay, yep, we're good. So just a really weird coincidence that that was set to 444. You don't have to do this as a random number as well. You could just create variables for each of those and set them yourself, but I kind of like just having it be a random number that they are set to. Now, the other thing that we need to do is in our event here, we need to run our find number because we need to know what our initial number is set to. So in our event, I'm just going to run find number. Okay. Compile and save. And then one other thing I forgot to do as well in our rotate dial, at the end, after we're finished, we need to set can rotate back to true. So I'm just going to copy that, and we're just going to put that at the very end here and set that to true. Okay, compile and save. Okay, now if we go back to our W underscore arrow, now we should be able to, where is our button? Oh yeah, it's just called arrow. I probably should have called that arrow button, but that's fine. Now, if we scroll down, we have on, let's see, we want on pressed. We can get our dial ref, drag that out, and we can do rotate dial. Compile and save. Okay. Now, all this is going to start coming together. Let's go back to our combination lock, BP underscore combination lock. And we need to add a couple of more things in. First of all, we need a way to exit out of our view when we go into that. So I'm going to just create a custom event, and we'll call it exit view. And we are going to want to basically do this, but the opposite. So let's see, under self, this is going to be get player character to go back to our player characters camera. And we want to disable input. So out of player controller, disable inputs. We also want to, let's see, just move this a little bit. We want to drag out of player controller and reset, ignore look inputs. And then we want to also set our movement mode back to walking. So out of player character, set movement mode. That will be walking. And then we also want to just put this here. We want to, out of our player controller again, set show mouse cursor, set that to false. All right, I think we got everything in there. Whoops. Just trying to straighten those. Maybe bring those down just a little bit. Okay. Now I'm also going to, well, let's actually create our keys for when we can call this. So I'm going to have this on escape, and I'm also going to have it on Q as my back buttons. I'm going to do it on both. I mean, you could do it on whatever you want. You can only do it on one, but in the editor here, if you press escape, it just quits the, stops playing. So I want to have it on both for right now. So inputs, escape, and let's get input Q. So on both of these, when we press both of these, I want to exit view. All right, compile and save. Just go ahead and test that. Okay, so we come in, I press Q. Press Q again. Okay, I don't have mouse control, so we need to fix that. Okay, guys, so it took me a second to figure out what was going on there. I realized that under our interaction, I had the player controller was plugged into target where it should have been plugged into player controller for enable input. And then same thing in our exit view under disable input, that needs to be plugged into player controller from our player controller and not target. So now this should be working where if we go in, we can press Q and we are back out and have full movements. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a couple of more variables. We need one to tell us if the lock is unlocked. So I'm just going to say is unlocked. And that is going to be a Boolean, and it's just going to be a single. And then we also need the actual lock combination. So lock combination. That is going to be an integer, and it is going to be an array. And then it's also going to be public. So we can go ahead and compile and save. Now, when we go back to our actual lock here, you can see that we have our lock combination. I need to create three elements here. 1, 2, 3. because those are going to be the actual numbers that we set for our combination. So now you can see our combination. We can actually set the numbers here. So we'll set it to 4, 5, 1. Okay. Now we don't have a way to check if that is correct yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to our combination lock and let's create a function and call this check code. And what we want to do here is we want to get our dials. We want to run a for each loop with break. And if we get our lock combination, if we type get here, get a copy, this will be the array index here. And out of the array elements, we want to get the number. So get number. And we want to see if these are equal. So equal. And when those are equal, let's run a branch. Then we are going to, actually, let's create another, sorry, not a variable. Let me delete that. Let's create a local variable and call this local success. And that will just be a Boolean single. And we are going to set that to true, on true, and then on false. We will set that to false. And on false, we're going to run this back and plug that into break. And I'm just going to add a couple of reroute nodes just to clean this up. Okay. Compile and save. Oh, and then we need one more thing here. We just need on completed, we just need a return node. And our local success will plug into this. And we'll just call this success. Okay, compile and save. All right, so now let's go back to the event graph. And let's create another custom event. And this will be called check every turn, because we want to run this code every time we turn the dial. So on check every turn, we're going to check code. And we'll get a branch out of success. When that is true, then our lock will be unlocked, and we will create another event for our unlock. So let's do another custom event called unlock lock. And we'll finish this in a second, but for right now, let's just call unlock lock. Now we need to do one more thing. We need a way to, when we go in and actually click on the widgets, we need it to actually register that. So right now it's not actually registering that we are hovering over that or clicking on those. So back in our combination lock, we can add a widget interaction. And then we can get our input left mouse button, because that's what I want to use to actually click on those. And we can get our widget interaction. And we can get an event called press pointer key. That will be on pressed. And the key will be left mouse button. And then on released, we want something called release pointer key. And that will be left mouse button as well. And that will go on released. Okay, so now if we compile and save, let's test this out. Okay, that is still not working. So let's see what's going on here. Oh, I see. So on the widget interaction, the interaction source here, we need to change this to mouse. So compile and save. Now it should work. There we go. Okay, so you can see that it is now registering that we're hovering over those, and when we click, that is perfect. It is moving those for us. Now, let's get a print string to kind of debug a little bit here. I believe everything is working, but let's just test this out. So on our dial, under find number, let's run a print string here. So print string, and then if we just plug our number into here, so that should read our number now, whatever we're on. Let's just test that. Okay, so you can see it set it there for a second, 310. Now you can see 4, 5. So that's good. It's registering the numbers that we are on. Now if I go to this one, 2, 3, okay, that's good. And let's see, I think I did already set this. Yeah, so our correct code is 451. So let's also run a check here, or a print string here. And let's plug success in there. And now we should be able to see when this is actually successful. So, okay, we're on 614. So if we go to 4, 5, 1, it's not printing out success. Let's see. Okay, I figured out what it was. There's a lot going on here, and a lot of things are communicating between each other that it's easy to get these mixed up. So we're not actually running our check here. We need to actually run that, but we need to run that on the dial, and we need to run it when we rotate the dial on the finished here. So what we need to do is we need to get a reference to the lock within our dial here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable. We're going to call that lock ref, and it's going to be BP combination lock object reference. And we're going to make that public, and then we're also going to expose on spawn. Now, if I compile and save, and if I go back to BP combination lock, if you remember up here at the very beginning on event begin play, we are spawning the BP dial here. So if we refresh this, then you will see, because we change that to be exposed on spawn, we now have a reference here that we can just drag out, and this is just self. Okay, now we can compile that. Now we can go back to BP dial, and we have a reference here, so I can get that reference, and I can now do check code. Or sorry, not check code. We want to check every turn, which is essentially running the check code. And I'm going to put that in between find number and where we're setting can rotate back to true. And again, that is on the finished timeline of the dial rotation here. Okay. I hope all that makes sense. I know it's a lot, and I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to keep these in just to show you guys how to kind of work through them. So let's try this out now. Okay, so now we're actually reading that it is false, which is good. So now if I set this to 4, 5, okay, false, 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 false. Now when I go over to 1, it should say true. There we go. Okay, perfect. So now we are essentially done. We just need to do a couple of extra things here. We need to actually create an event for our, or create the code for our unlock here. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have this part. You could do it a couple of different ways. You could move this up and then rotate this out like that. I think what I'll do here is just move this down just to show that it is unlocked. So let's go back here. We want to, out of here, we want to add a timeline. We'll call this unlock TL for timeline. Play from start. And I'll also play a sound here. This will be our unlocked sound. And let's open this up. And I'll make this 0.5. Add a float track. Call it alpha. Add 2 keys. First one will be 0, 0. Second one will be 0.5 on the time and a value of 1. And like we always do, highlight both of those, select auto, go back here, and we want to drag out of alpha and lerp. Our lerp needs to plug, or our alpha needs to plug into alpha. And we're going to go from 0 to maybe -3. -3. Again, this might be different for you, whatever you want to set that to be. And we want to get our combination lock and set relative location on the updates. And we'll split the struct pin. Our return value here will go into Z. And then a couple of other things we want to do. So when we finish this, we want to then exit the view. So we already have a code for that. I'll do a little delay here. Not destroy actor. Actually, we do want to destroy our actor. We'll add that in a second though. Delay. We'll do maybe like 1 second. And then we want to exit the view. And now we want to destroy the combination lock, and we also want to destroy the dials. So we have reference to the dials. We can get those. Destroy, might not be able to do it like that. Destroy actor. Yeah, there we go. And then we also want to just destroy actor on self, which is this blueprint. And that should be it. Let me, I'll go ahead and grab our sounds here. which I'll leave these in the link to the Patreon post, so you can use these as well. These are not that great of sounds, to be honest. You can probably find better ones. I just found some really quick ones. Okay, so I have, actually, hold on. You guys cannot hear this. Hold on, I just had to unmute some things. So I have the click and an unlock, which is not really a great unlock sound, but it's fine. So unlock will go there. And then our dial, I think I put that over here. On that one, compile and save, compile and save. Okay, I think we got everything. Let's try this out. So we have our numbers are randomized. That's good. That's making noise like we want. We set this to 4, 5, 1. It unlocks and disappears. And we exit our view, and we are good to go. Now, you probably, it depends on how you're going to implement this, but you probably also might want to make a little bit more of an animation on your combination lock. So, all I'm doing here is just moving this down. So you might want to also add, the first part where this part pulls down. Then you might want to create an additional event to where this swings open. You could do a bunch of things with that. It gets a little tedious, but it just depends on how much work you want to put into it. With this, it might be kind of hard. I'm imagining like if you have your lock on a door or like a latch, might be a little hard to get that to really animate without spending a lot of time. It might be hard to get that to really look good to where it animates correctly, and especially if you have a latch on here. So honestly, what I would probably do if I had a latch on here, I would probably just have the animation where this part goes down like that, and then I might just like fade out to like a quick black screen or something like that, or just destroy it before you really get the chance to even kind of notice what's going on. And I think that would be fine. If you have the sound in there, people are going to kind of recognize what's going on anyway. It will probably get pretty tedious if you try to really animate this, to have the full animation of it going down. Then you'd have to like turn it and rotate it the correct way so that the latch would come out. Again, that's one of those things that you can really get into trouble when you start, getting into the scope creep category. Make it work, and if you have time later on down the road, then maybe focus on those smaller details. But for right now, I hope that was useful for you guys. I've been wanting to do this tutorial for a long time. I ran into some issues, had to redo it a couple of times, but I'm pretty happy with how it came out. And I hope it works good for you guys. If you guys have any questions, as always, please feel free to let me know. If you want to support me on Patreon, be sure to check that out. You can, of course, get the files for this and the sounds and meshes and all of that stuff there. And I have some assets in the marketplace that you can check out if you want to support me that way. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right. Bye, guys.